Hey, everybody. I am Maribel Rivera. I'm an independent marketing event strategist and the Senior Director of Community Relations at ACEDS. And this is We Are ACEDS. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I get started with my guests. If you want to share any feedback, it's really welcome. Please ask your questions, comment, provide feedback, engage. If you're on YouTube, if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on Facebook, we're going to comment, we're going to respond, we will respond live or someone will respond in the chat. So please feel free to ask the questions. And make sure to react. If you like the episode, if you love it, whatever you want, clap for us, do whatever is necessary, get those reactions in there. So just to touch a little bit, ACEDS is really dedicated to diversity, inclusion, and equity through our partnership with Pipeline to Practice and through our IDEA committee. If you guys don't know what that is, we'll drop a link to the IDEA committee in the chat so that you can see it. And having conversations around diversity and inclusion, including difficult ones, are part of how we believe we can help move the needle forward. And we've done a lot of that over the last few months. But in addition to those conversations, we like to also highlight organizations that are helping to move the needle forward around equity and belonging. Some of those belong to the partners that we have. This week, I'm joined by Dana Feeney and Annie Oman of Nuix. Dana is the product marketing analyst at Nuix, and Annie Oman is the VP of Nuix customer experience. Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Maribel. Thanks for having us.
No problem.
Thanks for having us. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad to have you both. And Annie, you were a surprise last minute because we didn't know if your schedule would allow it. So I'm so happy that you were able to join us. Just really quick for our audience, if they don't know who you are, I'll start off with Annie. Can you share a little about who you are, what you do at Nuix, and anything else you want to share with our audience?
Sure, happy to. Thank you for having me. My name is Annie Oman. I am the VP of Customer Experience at Nuix. I've been at Nuix for about, it'll be 6 years in June. And I came on board to lead the learning and development function. So the last several years have been spent building and equipping our customers and just really pouring into that learning and development function at Nuix. And this is a real natural progression for me now to be focused overall on the broader topic of customer experience. So I'm very, very excited about the conversation today. Thanks for having me, Maribel.
Oh, thank you. And Dana?
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Nuix also for 6 years and change, actually. We must have come on board at a similar time, Annie. I started out in the product organization at Nuix. I have experience in technical writing and project management functions. And now I'm a part of the the marketing team, and I contribute to product messaging and positioning, as well as content, delivering the right message to the right audience. And so as part of this function, as part of the marketing organization, this is actually how I became a part of the Women in Nuix podcast and program. And so just really excited to talk about that today.
Excellent. Well, talking about Nuix, I didn't want to talk a lot about legal technology today because I've got two empowering women with me. And I, if anybody knows and follows me along, am always rah, rah, rah cheerleader for women. So question is, how is Nuix working on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, moving it forward within the organization? And I'm going to guess we're going to have the podcast pop up in that response.
Yeah, Dana, I'll start out if that's all right with you. Sure. Yeah, I think Nuix wants to look at diversity and inclusion and belonging in a really holistic way. So we've tried to start a number of different initiatives. The Women in Nuix podcast is one of them, and I think we'll talk today about all of the different sort of fingers that initiative has, the way it reaches out into the community and draws people into our Nuix community as well. That's one way. We've also got a mentoring program where we focus a lot on elevating everyone in the organization and investing in everyone and making space for people, for all different kinds of people to feel belonging, to feel empowered, to feel invested in. That mentorship program has been just really awesome. And then in addition to that, we are constantly looking at how we're investing in our learning and development programs, something very near and dear to my heart. We have an entire branch of the program that is internal, focused on professional development, on emotional development, on ways of keeping up with your well-being, right? We have a heavy influence there where we just really want to take care of one another, especially over this past year during the pandemic. I think Nuix did a really wonderful job just reaching out and taking care of each other and helping people to stay sane and healthy during this challenging time. And then we have a really cool branch of learning and development where we try to uplift our customers and those that come in contact with the Nuix community. Maribel, you and I have a great history of working together to partner the ACEDS training with our training to give an even more of a value to our partners and customers and really uplift everyone.
Yeah.
And I think on that note, thanks, Maribel. I just on the note of sort of uplifting our customers and uplifting our own people, that's kind of where the podcast comes in. You know, we talk to women throughout our partner organizations, throughout our customer organizations, and then also throughout Nuix. And so by doing that, we're giving a voice to those experiences. I think that is significant for continuing that inclusion conversation, because when we see ourselves reflected in other people's experiences, it helps us feel that connection. And so I think the podcast does it does a nice job, and I credit that entirely to our hosts and the people that our incredible guests that we talk to for pulling that story along.
So can one of you share with me, I don't know, I'm gonna say Dana, if you can share with me, where did the idea come from? How did this develop? Like, were you guys all just sitting in a room and decided? Were you listening to another podcast? Where did the idea develop?
Well, it wasn't because.
And how did you get buy-in? Is my other question.
Well, I think most of us who work on the podcast are also fans of podcasts. It may not be quite the same kind. I'm looking at you, Annie, with true crime, but fellow true crime. But the idea kind of roughly originated. There was some frustration, and I think if you're in technology, if you're in a number of industries, there was a level of frustration with the representation that was happening in industry events, where you look up at who's on stage, and there's a lack of gender representation. There's a lack of just diversity, generally speaking. So the idea was born of that frustration, and it was, how do we give voice to really remarkable women throughout the industries that we serve and throughout our, the people that we call our friends and our partners and our customers. How do we give voice and sort of like elevate those stories? And so the buy-in there was really easy. J.R. Jenkins, who is our head of marketing, got together with all of our hosts and myself, and we just kind of hashed it out from there. And it was, let's figure out what the format of this show is. And it was definitely a team effort as far as figuring out what would work. And we've made changes too we're in season 2 right now, and we've made changes to what works and what doesn't. And things have kind of really flowed organically as far as what has, keep continuing and developing the things that are working and just finding success in that way. So yeah, it was born of as so many things are from a problem or a frustration, and trying to leverage that into something positive.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask, you gave me a little bit, Dana, of why the stories are important, but I'm going to ask Annie because she's VP of Nuix Customer Experience. So I think listening from you, why is it important for us to tell these stories that you have been sharing on? It's Women in Nuix, but I love that the acronym is WIN. So on WIN, why is it important for us to tell these stories?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you for asking that. One of the things that has bubbled up most often in all of these conversations is these ongoing themes of women pouring into other women, women lifting up other women. And, I think you can map that into other things as well, not just women, but diversity in general. How do we help one another? How do we raise the stories up to light for people of all different backgrounds? But the theme that really came up is this women lifting other women, and this notion of leadership has nothing to do with your position in a company. It's leadership. How can you be a good leader to someone else and a good mentor to someone else? So I think that what happens in these conversations, I think about the episodes I've been involved with Beth Patterson, with Leita from the Black Mambas, with Carlin Malay from my own team, and this theme over and over again of these pivotal moments in our career and in our lives when someone took the time to pour into us and lift us up. So I would say the most important reason for telling these stories is to give hope to others, for one thing, that there's that possibility for them, and then to give a charge to all of us that we should be looking for ways to lift one another up. We should be looking for ways. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not if that person succeeds, I get pushed down. No, it's if I get a chance to succeed, man, I want to bring all of you with me. We're all going to succeed together.
And I will add too here that Annie uses a really wonderful phrase. She says, we stand shoulder to shoulder with one another. And when we stand shoulder to shoulder, we are able to better support and lift one another up. And I had to share that with the group here because it's something that I think about often. And it's a phrase that goes through my head often when there are opportunities for growth or opportunities for leadership, or it's, how can this be for everyone? And that's the podcast. And that's just, generally speaking in your professional and even personal life. So I think that's a really special turn of phrase.
And I love that. And I think some of the things that you shared, Annie, are kind of resonating, like hash it out, code for planning, soundboarding. For me, I always talk about leadership too, right? I don't, someone will tell me, well, this is a person who's a leader in the company. And I'll say, just because they're at a management or a director level doesn't mean they're a leader. You can have bad leaders in those roles. And I'm going to apologize if you hear any noise, because of course, when we decide to record, they start doing maintenance on the outside of my building. But I do agree with you as far as leadership and how important it is to raise everybody up and teach them to be great leaders. So I think that's terrific. Now, another question I have for you, as I was listening, and I listen regularly to the podcast, but
Thank you.
I'm a regular listener. But as I was listening to the podcast, I re-listened to a lot of the episodes yesterday just to catch up and make sure I had some questions. And as I was going through, there are rotating hosts. So Dana, can you share a little bit as to, and I know Annie is one of the hosts, but I'd love for you to share, why are there rotating hosts?
Yes, so we have 3 hosts right now. So it's Annie Oman and her so each of the hosts, and I'll preface this by saying each of the hosts have a different area of focus that they kind of bring to the podcast. So it's Annie. It's also Emily Tice, who is located in North America. She's our VP of customer experience for Nuix Discover. And then our host in EMEA. So as part of our second season, we sort of expanded into EMEA. We had guests from other regions and other parts of the globe before, but this is sort of our official entree into the EMEA region. And so our host in EMEA is our senior solutions consultant, Christina Mather. And we have a rotating, panel of hosts because it is important to share those different perspectives. And so, Annie brings like developing your own personal brand and your own personal sense of leadership to her focus when she speaks to her guests. And so Christina and Emily also bring their own sort of flavor and perspective as well. And so it makes for what I hope is, if you're listening from week to week, it was we were trying to figure this out. It was a little confusing at first. It's like, well, is there a consistent voice? But I hope over time, if others are listening the way that you're listening, Maribel, and thank you, that you're hearing those different perspectives and those different takes, and also just the dynamics of the interaction. It's gone from, again, it's that learning experience and getting more comfortable within the podcast of it's become much more of, I think, of like a natural, candid conversation, but each person approaches those conversations differently. And so that's what we're hoping we bring to it, is that you're hearing not only perspectives, but just those interactions. And many of the times, and I apologize if I'm jumping ahead in our conversation, but I think many times when we're thinking about who our guests are, it ends up being women who the hosts know, who are friendly with, who have a relationship. And so I think that really shines through too. And that's a really important part, where it's having that shared history and that shared context of, we already have this connection. Now we're just two friends having a conversation.
I think that brings us to one of the questions I wanted to ask, because I recently heard, or yesterday I re-listened to the Black Mamba episode, which I loved. I thought it was an amazing episode. And Annie, you were the host, and you had your first man on the show, which was Stu Clark from Nuix, with Leda from the Black Mambas. So she was so interesting, and I'd love for you to share a little bit more about Leda and who she is, because I wouldn't do justice as far as just listening and what she does, because it was amazing. And I'm sure you prepped with her and everything. But after you share a little bit about Leda, I'd love to know, how do you find some of these guests, which Dana started talking about a little bit?
Yeah, and if you're comfortable with this, I'll switch the order of that a little bit, because I think it will tie together quite well. Nuix is involved in a number of different conservationist philanthropic activities. And so as part of that, Stu Clark is just an amazing ambassador for conservationist issues as a whole, and has been to Africa many times and has a specific relationship with a couple of different organizations, the Black Mambas being one of them. So Black Mambas and Helping Rhinos, and these are both conservationist types of organizations in their own right. We met Leda because Stu invited her to speak to a wider Nuix event when the pandemic hit and we were all working at home. We were looking for ways to draw close to one another, to really have that connection, and we were also trying to draw some attention to our philanthropic activities. So Stu invited her to speak to the wider Nuix employee community. From there, I mentioned to Dana that she would make an excellent host for our WIN program, and here's why. For those of you that haven't listened to this episode, the Black Mambas is an all-women anti-poaching unit in Africa. And I say that slowly because I want it to really sink in what the impact of that is. All women in Africa working on poaching and anti-poaching activities. Let me add one element to that. They are unarmed. These are non-violent, all women. And who else could be a non-violent organization that could battle this very difficult issue without violence and without, weaponry? So it's just, she's extraordinary on so many levels. She has knocked down barriers on so many levels. And it's all for this notion of conservation, right? Taking care of not just her land, but her people. And one thing that really stood out for me in that interview was the reason that they go in as nonviolent anti-poaching activists is because of their love for their community and because of their desire to have unity in their community. She said, I live in villages with poachers. I don't want to see their children being raised without a dad, right? So this overarching love for community and love for unity helps her to go outside of herself and be incredibly brave to combat this issue with no weapons. The work they do, I can't say enough about it. I'm sure if you could have seen Dana and my face during that whole episode, it was like this. I mean, we're just blown away by them. It was amazing.
I was like that. I was like, oh my God, this woman is amazing. I want to send her a car, because she was like, they need cars, they need clothing, I was like, I want to send her everything. I was like so amazed by that episode. It really touched me. And you just sharing that gave me like goosebumps, because it was such an amazing episode, and we will definitely have to drop the link for that episode in the chat for this afterwards. Now, just talking about that a little bit more. So Leda is just one of the amazing speakers you've had. You've had some other amazing speakers, which we talked about prior to this going live. Can you share some of your favorite episodes and who we should be looking out for in the future, or who do you want on here so that we can like kind of tag them and say, all right, you need to be on when?
I love it. I'll share my favorite episodes, but then Dana, I'm really interested to hear your perspective as well. Certainly Leda was a huge, that's going to probably have an impact on me forever, that episode. But I also really enjoyed 2 other episodes talking to Beth Patterson. So for those of you that are in eDiscovery, you probably have heard her name because she's a legend in our industry, and she's a good friend of mine, and we've been connected on multiple projects. And hearing her story, her cross-continental story, you know, her international presence, the way her leadership developed over time, and we're very simpatico when it comes to our desire to lift other people, and that need for looking to see who you can mentor. In every project I work on with Beth, there's always someone where she says, what about so-and-so? What can we do to help her? You know, what can we do to, how would it be all right if I coached her? Would it be all right if I mentored her? You know, I just love that heart that she has. And then I interviewed Carlin from my own team, and she really blazed a trail in women in technology and was surrounded by, you know, alpha males in a law enforcement centric, investigation centric technology world, and was able to just knock down barriers, and from her own ability to, as we have discussed, go shoulder to shoulder, as well as her brains and her, you know, technical acumen, she was able to really knock down some cool barriers, and it was a great discussion.
Yeah, I think you you covered so much there, Annie, and I, you know, thinking about like who were my favorite conversations is like, well, which of my kids do I like better, which I might have an answer for sometimes once in a while. But anyway, I digress.
No, I can agree with that.
Right? Depends on the day. I think, so the Leta, you know, the conversation with Leta, I want to just second what Annie said, like that's a lasting impression. And the way that she talked not only about her role and why she decided to become a Black Mamba, but remarkable, but also that the impact to the community, not only in the nonviolent efforts, but also that she is a role model to the girls who grow up in the communities around the nature preserve where they are in South Africa. Just this really forward-thinking, visionary kind of, you know, it's what our podcast embodies, and that, you know, it's what you can aspire to. It's like, here's a projection of what you can be, and just the fact that she's living that every day is, it's really special. I really enjoyed listening to the perspective of Angela Coble, who is our EMEA office manager. So Angela has a life and career coach, and she talked about the transformative elements of having that life and career coach, and who happened to be actually, and was something that we talked about during the episode, who happened to be a man, and that her choice to have a career coach was agnostic. It was just based on connection. You know, it's that human connection. It's not gendered. It's just, you know, what's going to be the most fruitful and collaborative approach. And she talked about how, you know, having a career coach changed her approach to the way she solves problems. And it just, I think it had a lot of, it was a wonderful way to look at, you know, what having that perspective and that guidance can do in your life. And it was inspirational to me. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Kate Clark and Kiri Parr of the eDiscovery firm ELMS, which is based in Australia. Just their perspective on, I think, honest, open feedback within the firm, but then also having a life first mentality and having a life first approach to the way that they run their business and the way that they support and kind of like grow their consultants. That was just a really, it was a perspective that, you know, you take for granted. Okay, well, of course we're life first, but especially in the context of the pandemic and so many people being at home all the time, it was just, it was a great reminder. And I also just want to mention, we've had Caroline Sweeney of Dorsey and Whitney, an amazing episode, Cynthia Vasquez, who is the founder of Propel Consulting. We've also had, so you mentioned Carlin, we had Angela Coble from within our organization. And so, yeah, we've just had a really strong rotation of guests, and I want to make sure that I'm giving all the props.
And I think we're dropping the SoundCloud, but they're sharing the Win SoundCloud so that people can listen to the Black Mamba episodes where they'll catch the other ones. But dream big. Who do you want that you haven't had? I don't care if it's a celebrity or like, you know, the girl from around the corner who's at the supermarket who does amazing things. Who are some of the guests that you want to have?
Oh, I feel like Dana should go first on that one.
Oh no, Annie, I insist. My goodness. You know, I don't have a specific answer. I'm gonna be too honest here right now. And I was thinking it would be interesting to have a podcast, and maybe it's not this podcast, and it probably already exists, but to have a podcast called like Mom Friends. And I think that is like the kind of people, it's that unassuming person who you're kind of friends with, you know, who's your kid's friend's mom. And it's those conversations that I really enjoy, where you're like, we know each other at this sort of super, you know, hi, how are you kind of level, but people have these really remarkable stories. And so I don't have any one person in particular, but if I've learned anything from this podcast, it's that most people have a really fascinating story to tell, and they have a really fascinating journey, which is one of those things that we learned in producing the podcast and in talking to our guests, was that it's a lot about the journey, and people are so open and willing to share how they got to where they are. And so, yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to have that Mom Friends podcast, but that perspective of just knowing that everyone has that story is kind of like what keeps me excited and coming back. And yeah, you might have a specific person. I don't know.
You could always bring like the Nuix Mom Friends. I mean, you can do that.
Exactly. Like, let's have
one of your Win episodes.
That's right.
Annie, is there anyone like you want?
Well, if we're shooting for the stars, I would say I want to hear from Michelle Obama. I think that she would have a lot.
Oh, that's the better one.
No, yours was wonderful.
That's a good one.
But Michelle Obama, wouldn't that be great? So Maribel, see what you can do. You know, see what.
We're going to put it out into the world.
But can you imagine, talk about the voice of hope, but also the voice of empowerment and the voice of just pushing us to do more, to work harder, to be better when it comes to looking outside of ourselves, looking for those that we can help and lift up. She seems like she would have a really great message around that.
Okay, we're going to have to make that happen, Annie. I like that answer too. But I think we should work on the Mom Friends, like the Nuix Mom Friends. I think that would be a good episode.
Dana, I'm in it with you.
Everyone has a story, you know, especially Michelle Obama. I mean, really, let's tell her story. Yeah, let's do that.
So we'll start there. Mom Friends with Michelle Obama.
We touched a little bit. On Nuix and how Win plays a part in it. But how, you know, and Annie, you did a great job about talking about the mentoring and everything else. But can you expand a little bit more on that piece and how this Win episode helps to push everything forward as far as the mentoring and the training and connecting with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a little bit about that, but actually Dana probably has a more holistic perspective on that. I think, like I said, Win is just one small part of the efforts that we're making to have a bigger voice in diversity and inclusion. I think all of us, if we're honest, would say we're behind, right? I mean, everybody would say we're behind. There's lots of work to be done. There's so much that we could do better. So we're in a position right now of really, really learning, you know, where can we as Nuix apply the specific strengths we have to that particular, I don't want to say problem, but right, the issue, that goal. So WIN and the Get In program have, and let me back up and say, when I first got to Nuix, the thing that really stood out to me was the people, this level of passion and creativity and innovation and ingenuity. And I always felt like I was the dumbest person in the room, but in a good way, right? Just challenged by how great these people are. So you take that group of people that has a passion for getting things right and for finding innovations and for being on the leading edge, and then you give them something like diversity and inclusion and belonging and say, take that and apply it here. That's what we're trying to do. So with the WIN, with the mentoring, we're trying to take this sort of innovative, shoulder-to-shoulder mindset and apply it to that. So I realize that's a bit of a vague answer, but what I'm saying is stay tuned, because I think we're going to find the ways that we have a unique ability and capability and point it in that direction. Dana, what do you think? What would you add?
No, I completely agree. I do think that this is, I think WIN is one small part, but it's also emblematic of the efforts that we're going through, and the stay tuned is absolutely true. And I think from my own perspective, I say in an organization, the marketing organization creates content, we create messaging, like I said at the top of the show. And I think this particular WIN in particular has given me, and I think I would venture to say, our team, and I would almost say the more of the organization at large is just taking a second to think about who is your external representative, and making sure that we include others in that when we have those conversations. Who's creating that content? Who is your spokesperson? Who's doing that webinar? Who's hosting this event? And just trying to make sure that when we do that, we're keeping in mind that that there are people at all levels who can, like you said, be leaders, but also who can embody all of the diversity of our organization and put them forward. And that I think that starts with making sure that we have more women in those roles. And I think we're doing a great job. I really do. I think that awareness is coming through, and I'm really proud of us.
So I'm going to throw a curveball here, because this wasn't on your questions that I sent over to prep you guys, but Annie really touched on something, and it's about imposter syndrome, right? You said, sometimes I feel like the dumbest person in the room, but you're channeling it in a positive way. So it's not you're conquering imposter syndrome. You're saying, I'm taking the opportunity to be in this room with all of these individuals and learn something from them. So can you touch on that? Because I have some people who are always afraid to talk about imposter syndrome. And I think it's for women, it's always like, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want anybody to know that sometimes I feel that way. How do you feel about that? I don't want to if you don't want to answer it, just don't. But
I love it.
Okay.
I love it. I think you have hit on something that's so important, because to me, being the dumbest person in the room sometimes is the way that you're a leader. I think it's so much about your leadership, right? So I watched a couple of weeks ago now, Simon Sinek. Are you familiar with Simon Sinek? He's wonderful. And he had a short video called Be the Idiot in the Room. And it was so perfect. He talked about, ask the questions. If you don't understand what is going on, use it as an opportunity to learn. Ask the questions, and then don't stop there. Clarify, dig in, use that opportunity of not knowing what someone's talking about to gain better clarity. And 9 times out of 10, most of the other people in the room will say, I didn't understand that either. I was really hoping that someone would draw that to light. I had an example of this just the other day where I said, I have a question, and maybe it's a stupid question, but I don't know what these words mean that you just said, right? I won't give away what we were talking about in the meeting. But then I heard all these other voices on the call say, yeah, I don't know what that means either. And it was an opportunity to step out, be a little bit vulnerable and exposed, and let everybody get some more information and some more clarity. I think it also leads to unity when you are willing to put yourself out there like that.
I love
That's
that.
right.
Thank you. Dana, do you want to,
I did want to say, I wanted to say that.
I want to say thank you, because I do have women that are like, no, I don't want to talk about that. And I'm like, why wouldn't you want to talk? I mean, that's the number one thing for a lot of women is they're always,
Totally.
right? We're not so much now because we're teaching them, but a lot of women have been afraid to come forward and ask questions, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Dana?
Right. Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think, first of all, I have heard that from so many people, and I think it's a Nuix thing, and it's a really wonderful problem to have that we have so many really bright, like just super intelligent people that it's almost like you walk in. I spent a long time at Nuix, and even still, I'm like, oh yeah, this is clearly I am not getting what's going. But it's really nice. I think it's become a source of comfort where it's like there are really capable, brilliant people working on the things that we do. And so I agree, Annie, and it's a common refrain in Nuix and a good problem to have. And the other thing I was going to share is, and this is just I've been thinking a lot about imposter syndrome as we plan out some of our upcoming content. We've talked about having like a webinar of panelists covering a particular topic, and imposter syndrome is one of those topics that has come up. And I read, and I don't know if you get Harvard Business Review emails, a recent one, I believe it was HBR, talked about the negativity associated with the term imposter syndrome. It almost puts the onus on the woman. It's a syndrome, it's a sickness that you are. And so I've been thinking a lot about what is a better way to have that conversation about, and not put the onus on the person who is feeling that way. And then it also, that it has other undertones of inequality. And so I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was a really interesting article, and I'm happy to share it in here if I can find it. But it kind of pivots that notion of what that means and who it's actually putting the onus on, because it's really the system. It's not the individual.
Yeah.
Well, and I think so often, I've been working in a lot of cross-functional teams lately. So where I have holes in my knowledge, or where I need to ask questions and be the idiot in the room, it also gives the other people, because, okay, sure, we've got a lot of really innovative, talented, technical people that also have gaps in their knowledge and also have challenges that they don't know how to solve. And for them to see other people being vulnerable like that allows them to also say, by the way, I might be able to write code like nobody's business, but I can't compose an email that doesn't offend people. Could you help me? There's just so many ways that we have, that other people might have gaps that we wouldn't think of because they're not ours,
Yeah, no, I love that. I totally agree. And looking, I've talked about this yesterday actually with someone, is you need to, I think Sheila Grella was actually there. We had a coffee chat at one of the events, and we were talking a little bit about sometimes you need to mentor, right? And it's either up or out, or it doesn't matter where the person is. Sometimes you have to mentor up and not just be mentored down into, from leadership down. Sometimes it's mentoring up or mentoring out. So it's the same as managing, right? So you have to learn how to do those different things. And I think that's really important. Thank you guys for being so open and honest about that. I love that you've shared a little bit about that. And I didn't want to take us off topic because I really wanted to focus on it. But we are talking about women, empowering women as well, and win. So I think that's a big win for us as well. I wanted to just, we're in our final few minutes over here. What is coming up next for women in Nuix? What should we be looking out for? Any activities? You mentioned webinars, but what else?
So our next episode will be dropping, looks like maybe the end of next week. That will feature Sonali Bhavsar, who is a managing director and AI strategist. I believe she's at KPMG, and she's speaking with our host, Emily Tice. And so that's going to be a really great conversation around just like they focus a lot on mentoring and giving back to the community. Really great conversation. We're looking at having a panel webinar. We're also looking at doing a survey within our customer base to kind of get a temperature on, what are topics that our customers and partners would want to be hearing about. And all of these things there are some blog posts upcoming and everything. I think there's a link shared. It's all on our landing page. So as we come up with, as we keep planning and producing content, you will see it there.
Great. So with that, how do we subscribe to the podcast? I know we have the SoundCloud there, but how do we stay up to date with what's going on so that we're receiving everything that Women in Nuix is doing right to our inbox or a notification on our phone?
So yeah, I would say just that the landing page on nuix.com, and then you can listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe, and you'll get push new episodes as they come out.
Perfect. And is there a hashtag we should be doing when we're talking about Women in Nuix, or an @?
We don't have an @ but I would say Women in Nuix that's what we would hashtag with. Yep.
Perfect. So we'll make sure to hashtag Women in Nuix as well. Is there anything, I'll start with you, Dana, anything, last words you want to share with our audience?
I just want to say thank you for having us and thank you for your time. And I think the more that we have these conversations and the more that we connect our efforts, the more successful that we'll be in them. And I'm really excited to see what's next in our partnership with ACEDS as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Annie?
Yeah, a big thank you from me as well, Maribel. And I am really looking forward to maybe catching up with you down the road at how we can expand the partnership that we've started around the learning and development aspect of it, because we're really seeing some of the younger people in our industry benefiting hugely from the eDiscovery Executive paired with our training classes. So thank you for including us on this. And I can't wait to see how Nuix and ACEDS work together more and more in the future.
Yeah, you guys have become such a great partner, and we're really super excited about everything. I was excited about this episode because, of course, I'm in charge of our diversity here at ACEDS, so it was exciting for me to do that. And Annie, just working with you over the last year on making sure that we're training everybody and working together, that's been such a great honor. And just getting to know the whole team. I've known the Nuix team for years, so getting to know more and more of you has just been terrific for me. I want to say thank you both again for joining me. And to our audience, thank you all for tuning in. We saw lots of comments in the chat, so thank you guys for sharing all of that. If you guys want to stay tuned, if you need to watch this, it'll be on our LinkedIn of videos. You'll also find it on YouTube, on our Facebook. It is on our Twitter as well. Be sure to check in and follow up. This Friday, don't miss George Sosha on eDiscovery Leaders Live. And next Tuesday, we have Kelly Twigger with the Case of the Week, where she talks about recent case law decisions. So thank you again to our community. Peace, love, and community to all. Oh, I was fucking muted.